Welcome everyone to our KWLA virtual meetups. So we've been doing these on Tuesdays and Thursdays. If you were here on Tuesday, we are repeating information, but we have different participants. So our discussions afterwards might be a little bit different. So we're sticking around. I'm Jennifer Kennedy. I'm the communications director at KWA. And I teach kindergarten through 5th grade Spanish at Southern Elementary in Lexington, Kentucky. And I assume Jackie Van Houten is going to be joining us too. Her and I have been moderating these talks. Our schedule usually is we have someone talk for a little bit about a specific topic, and then we'll break out into breakout rooms with some discussion questions so that we can have some small group discussions, and then we'll come back as a big group and kind of share out what came out of our smaller group discussion. So that's sort of the schedule for the next hour. And today we have Stephanie Knight with us from the University of Oregon.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And here to talk about linguafolio with us today. So welcome, Stephanie.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm so excited to be with you today. Particularly, I told the last group this as well, but I'm a hilltopper. I went to Western Kentucky, so I love my Kentucky. Your story about singing my old Kentucky home made me laugh because my best friend in undergrad they had a food day when she was studying abroad in Spain, and everyone asked her to bring Kentucky Fried Chicken. So it was funny, but yes, so it's lovely to be with you all today. And I'm here to talk about linguafolio Online as a platform. It's actually, student accounts are free until July, and we'll talk about that too. So if you want to give it to your students as some enrichment over the summer, anything along those lines, feel free to pass it out. But we'll do a quick overview of, I think, the why linguafolio Online, what we know about learning portfolios and why they work, and then show you some snapshots of some of the technical features so you get an idea of what the platform feels like and looks like. And then if you have any questions at the end, we'll dive right into those. So yes. Do you mind, Jennifer, letting me share my screen?
Oh, yeah,
This happens to me every day. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. Well, and last time I remembered to actually check the box before we started. I didn't remember this time.
I've been patting myself on the back if I remember. My percentage is not good yet, so I understand completely.
It used to be something you checked in before you started, but it's not an option now.
And someone told me it's in the meeting settings, and it's not in my meeting settings.
Not mine.
Okay, perfect. I'm glad that we're in this together, Jennifer. All right, so here, let me dive right in. So again, why linguafolio Online? And we can apply this more broadly to language learning portfolios in general, an overview of the features, and then if you're interested, how can you get help? Where can you get started? So really, linguafolio Online boils down to one thing, and that's learner empowerment. And I mean that in the sense of autonomous, self-directed learning. It's designed to help inculcate a series of reflective practices within learners and to help them really think about language learning, what it means, and how they can continue growing, even in situations in which their teachers cannot be right with them, giving them lots of feedback. Before we dive into the platform itself, I think it's beneficial to look at the reflective cycle. So as you see right here, it's not a traditional cycle in that I've made the arrows go backwards and forwards and also across. So we'll start with the 4 phases of reflective practice, and I'll talk a little bit about the arrows and the directionality that we have here. So at the top we have setting goals. These are typically identified with can-do statements. Particularly in Kentucky, you all are quite adept at using can-do statements in comparison to most states. In the Southeast, actually, there's a quite nice uptake of can-do statements and proficiency orientation. Then you'll move, then you'll see into the right, we have selecting strategies. So these can be language learning strategies themselves, like circumlocution to work towards a goal. It could also be language use strategies. So for example, providing explanations or grounders of if you make a request for something big or something along those lines. At the bottom, you see creating evidence. So this is any artifact that captures language learning, a photo, a recording, a document upload that's meaningful to the students. And then lastly, self-evaluation to the left and reflection. This is considering essentially all of the other phases and how well you set goals, how accurate they were for yourself. Were they out of your reach? Were they too audacious, or were they just on the money? Is it you like this goal, but you really want to think about it in a slightly different context? Also looking at selecting strategies. Did the strategies work for you? Are these strategies you want to keep using? Do you need to try something else? And then obviously the quality of your evidence. Does that evidence indicate that you had a really successful interaction with the target language? Or does it indicate that there's some place that you want to keep working towards because you haven't quite achieved the goal yet? And so that's actually why you see the arrows going all different ways, because reflective practice, it helps to, when you present it to the students originally, to present it as a cycle where you start with goal setting, and then after evaluation, you go back to goal setting and either revise or refine your goals. But once they become adept at reflective practice, it gets much more messy. It becomes, you bounce around while you're evaluating. You're like, you know what? Goals are fine. You go right back to reflecting on my strategies that I used and things along those lines. So that's why you see all of the directions here. So with Linguafolio Online in particular, we see a few positive affordances, quite a few, but specifically because it's an online tool, feedback is rather quick. You don't do a lot of bean counting with Linguafolio Online in terms of this kind of traditional idea where -5 for every missing accent mark or something along those lines. What you do is you give this holistic evaluation. This is a goal, is essentially, it's a goal. You may have worked towards it, but you haven't shown enough evidence for me to evaluate anything yet. Can do with help is, you know, you're on your way, you're creating evidence, but maybe you have to ask your speech partner to give you help because you've lost words, or maybe you have to look up words or do extra research ahead of time before you're able to engage. Can do is you can do this by yourself, and then can do well is you knock it out of the park. Also, what we see in the online platform in terms of a positive externality is storage and file share. The storage is unlimited for students on Linguafolio Online. They can upload any kind of file. I have those all listed right there. What's nice is the online web version of Linguafolio Online also comes with a free app, and they can capture any evidence with the app as well, including video. On the website, they can only record audio. They can't actually record video within the website, but with the app, they can. So this brings us to an app, so you get a quick idea of what it looks like. It's really designed, like I said, to capture evidence, and students can self-evaluate on the quality of the evidence after they've uploaded it. They log in, they pick the evidence type, and then they can either upload evidence to assignments you've created, can-do statements you've assigned, or to any can-do statement of their selection. So steps to success for making LFO work for you. It's beneficial to start with this infographic that we created for LFO in classroom implementation. You'll recognize the phases of the reflective cycle embedded within here. But starting off with your students about why goals even matter. How do goals help direct them? How do they help focus their working memory? Why are they motivating? How can we make sure the goals are motivating? And work with them to set goals for the class. This is particularly important as they shift to more autonomous spaces, as has been our contemporary practice right now, given our current global crisis, but really helping them to articulate goals for themselves alongside with your expertise there as guidance. Then selecting can-do statements that align with the goals, designing tasks and activities to meet targets, and helping students design their own tasks and activities to meet those targets as well. So if they're interested in learning how to follow recipes, maybe they want to watch a how-to cooking video in the target language on YouTube and create the dish based on that. Things like that help them come up with what those activities could be. And then they capture whatever they did in some meaningful way, photo, recording, like we said before, and then upload it. And that should lead them back to re-examining their goals, making sure their goals are where they want them to be, adjusting them if they need to, or get new goals if they're ready to move on to something else. We did some research on Linguafolio Online with teachers in Oregon, a variety of contexts, both rural and urban settings. And what we saw was that teachers that did well with the portfolio set goals alongside students, so they involved students in some way in the goal setting process, and then engaged in backwards design to meet those goals. LFO was used in an ongoing fashion. So for teachers that essentially introduced it and then waited weeks and weeks to have the students upload it, and then waited more weeks and to have students upload to it, the students actually had a negative perception of the portfolio. And this is replicated in quite a bit of the research that exists on it, because they weren't actively engaged in the reflective cycle. It felt superfluous, like it was just slapped on top of what they actually had to do, and it wasn't integrated into their learning. So we know more frequently works better. The one study was able to discern a tipping point, and it was in post-secondary, it was in post-secondary. It was introductory French and Spanish classes, and students who did not use the portfolio at least 4 times had a very negative perception of the portfolio, and that was in a 16-week semester. And so that's the closest approximation we have, is about every 4 weeks seems to be consistent enough, at least in that context. And then develop a proficiency-based classroom to produce adequate evidence. What often happens for teachers that are shifting away from a more grammar-oriented paradigm is they want their can-do statements to be things like, I can conjugate AR verbs, or I can conjugate irregular preterite verbs, things along those lines. And that certainly doesn't generate proficiency-related evidence. And so we want learners, so teachers that really focus on those grammar and discrete grammar and vocabulary points struggle a bit. And then lastly, use reflection to set new goals. The most common struggles are basically the inverse of the keys to success, except for what I will bring up is that students tend to undervalue their own abilities at the beginning of learning any language. They become so overwhelmed by what they don't know. So shifting to a can-do statement kind of attitude and helping the students consistently come back to what they do and what they can do well really helps them start to like Linguafolio or any other language learning portfolio. But that takes a little bit of time. There tends to be a hurdle you have to overcome at the beginning. So some critical features of the platform include creating accounts, setting up groups, setting up student accounts, can-do clusters, which are just groups of can-do statements that you've assigned, however you wish to group them, and then lastly, assignments, and I'll show you a quick snapshot of what those features look like in the platform. So to set up a teacher account, you go to linguafolio.uoregon.edu and click Get Growing, and you can actually create your own account today for free. Teacher accounts are all free. The only accounts that have to be paid for are student accounts. And then within Linguafolio Online, you can set up groups. What most people do, and you'll see it's pretty easy, pretty prominent at the top of the page, most people set up groups based on the class periods that they teach, particularly in secondary contexts. So you'll see first, second, third, fourth period. What a lot of successful teachers also do, particularly if they have a class like a Spanish 4 or a French 4 or Japanese 4, and they have a wider range of proficiency levels in the classroom than you tend to at introductory levels, is they will actually create subgroups within each class. And that way they can differentiate the can-do statements that have been assigned to different groups of students. And it's a nice mechanism to use there. But really how you group the students is completely up to you. Then, sorry, I think I clicked. So that brings us to setting up student accounts. There are 3 different ways for teachers to set up students' accounts. One is that each group you create comes with a join code, and that code is just copied and pasted when the students are setting up their account, and they get automatically put into your group. That's the recommended way to do it. That way you as a teacher don't have to keep up with as much, and the students can appropriate more of the account creation process. The other ways are you can add students quickly on the dashboard just by clicking Add Student. You see right here, you type in the information for each student one at a time, or you can do a batch upload where you fill in an Excel file or a CSV file, upload that, and it has a student name, student email address, and their username and password there. And you populate that, and then the students will be in your class. And don't worry, if you've created a username that already exists, you will receive an error message, and you can just upload the next. You can upload those again for the ones that were incorrectly, or at least create a username that was already in use. So student accounts, and this is what a teacher screen will look like. You'll see that the usernames, something I want to highlight is they all have to be 6 characters long or longer. The name, something you might want to think about is they will always appear in alphabetical order by whatever the first name is that students list. So if you want them alphabetized by last name, you would ask them to enter their last name first. Passwords have to be at least 6 characters long as well. And the email, I bring this up because some districts have different privacy restrictions related to student emails. Know that we don't contact the students at all. We only use the email as a way to look up their account if should they encounter any technical issues. But the email only has to look like an email. It doesn't have to be a real email. So, and that is something to know just if you have to make these things up because of not wanting to share the student emails. So creating can-do clusters, you'll see you do that straight from your dashboard as a teacher. Again, what a can-do cluster is just a grouping of can-do statements. Most teachers, particularly secondary teachers, create their clusters by unit that they're teaching. What's nice is you can assign a start date or an end date. So as a teacher, before school starts in August, I could create every unit's can-do statements for the whole year and then have certain dates that they're displayed to students. You don't have to include those start dates or end dates, and those are always editable. You can also provide a color. So if the students want to see a particular grouping, like unit 1 could always be blue, unit 2 could always be red. And that way, if they do all display at the same time, students can find what they're looking for a little bit more easily. And then how that process goes is pretty efficient. So what you do is you select the mode of communication at the top of the screen just by clicking on it, and the tab will change. Then you select the level for the can-do statements, and then you just use the check marks that are there to assign the can-do statements. As soon as you check them, they are assigned. As soon as you uncheck them, they are unassigned. There's nothing else you have to save. It's a really fast process. There's also a box which you can see at the bottom where you can type in your own customized versions of can-do statements that are more contextualized to your class. The assignment feature also is pretty new to LFO actually, and it exists. So and it follows the same functionality as creating a can-do cluster, except you get to create an assignment description. So it could be something as simple as page 3, exercise 2 in your book is related to this can-do statement, please upload. Or it could be a whole project overview with multiple can-do statements that apply to it there. So you'll see this is the interface. It looks pretty familiar. And then lastly, so you get an idea of the learner experience. Here's the learner dashboard. At the top, they can always upload evidence from the top, select their evidence type. From here, they can actually select any can-do statement within the necessful, actful examples. They also can select anything you've assigned to them. So they can see their assignments. They can also see can-do clusters that have been assigned to them. This My Proficiency overview, each arc corresponds, or each circle within the target corresponds with a proficiency sublevel. So in the center, we have novice low, moving all the way out to distinguished and superior. And so as students upload evidence in quantity and quality, these arcs actually darken. And so they can actually kind of see their evidence growing over time. And it's also nice because it lets them reflect, for example, if they focus only on interpretive evidence, that they might need to do more work in interpersonal mode or something along those lines. At the bottom of their dashboards, they also can upload directly to an assignment instead of going through the reverse upload process where they start with the evidence first. Here they start with the can-do statements first and then upload the evidence there. But what is nice that I like to show people is if they use the top of the dashboard, it actually gives them a lot of information about language proficiency in general, and as well as the modes of communication, because it will be up to them to select the modes that are available. Then they'll have to select the proficiency level they're at. And within like novice, an explanation will pop up for what novice mid is versus novice high, etc. And they can always go back and forth if they think they've selected the wrong area. One other thing to remember is at this top, you'll see this, for this particular can-do statement, 2 evidence samples are there. If I were to click this, I could see both of those displayed for me, as well as how I self-evaluated related to those. And then you do have to self-evaluate before you upload evidence, which is something some learners get stuck because that bar won't turn bright green. And once you're looking at all of your old evidence you've created, you can also add a new evidence sample immediately, which is pretty nice. So here's what you do if you need help. lfonetwork.uoregon.edu has a plethora of free resources for teachers. These can, they are designed for Linguafolio Online, but they're really language portfolio centric. So you could certainly adapt them to any other portfolio context that you have. There's a welcome packet with example activities, a series of modules that are available for teachers to do some short videos, proficiency examples that you can share with students so they understand the difference between a novice high versus an intermediate low. The necessful ACTFL can-do statements are linked there. And we will have an autonomous learning module where we help learners think through what it is to set a goal without the teacher right next to you. How do you know if you've succeeded without the teacher there to evaluate every piece of evidence you've created, and things along those lines. And that should be posted. We had hoped to have it posted this week on Friday. It looks like there was a small issue, so we'll have to extend that by a few days, but next week it will be there for sure. The necessful website, and here's the URL, also has a variety of free resources to get started. If you look under LF for Learners, for example, there are videos created for students to walk them through each phase of the reflective cycle. There are also PDFs to give them like one-page summaries of what's involved there. I particularly like a strategy menu that walks students through language learning strategies for every mode, as well as intercultural learning strategies and vocabulary learning strategies, which is nice. Gives them a plethora of ideas to start picking in terms of their strategic learning. Then, sorry, my apologies. This is your home base, lfolio@uoregon.edu. We are always happy to help. Please shoot an email to us and we will dive in to talking to you all. If it's an implementation question in terms of classroom application, those usually come to me. If it's technical, our great tech support staff will be able to jump on immediately and help you. Also, if your student wants if your students would like to use their free account, this YouTube video provides the students with the access code that they need to get that account. I have sent a PDF of these slides to you all, so you should have access to those soon if you haven't already received them. And that brings us to our questions. What questions do you have for me today?
So I have a few questions.
Yes.
So is all the self-evaluation, goal setting and all that all happens in English, or does it depend on the level?
That's a great question. In terms of what we know and how at least the platform works too, all of the goals are communicated in English. If you use the customized can-do statement option, you could always write them in the target language. That would be up to you. But they are only available in English on the Classic platform. There's no way to display the platform in other languages at this point. And then the reflections. My answer will be whatever is best for your students to engage meaningfully and cognitively in the process of learning. There's plenty we can do without using RL1, certainly, even at a novice, low, novice, mid level. If you think, for example, of that pain scale that you use at the doctor's office, 1 through 10 with the faces, that actually gives us quite a good deal of information about how the students are feeling and self-evaluating in relationship to the goals. So thinking of very visual representations for a younger or for a less proficient audience, whereas at a higher proficiency level, like my advanced Spanish students wrote me a cover letter related to their portfolio where they explained all of their strengths, their new goals for the future, and that was all in Spanish, right? Where I certainly wouldn't expect a Spanish 1 student to give me that level of Spanish. So, I mean, as long as we use some imagery to scaffold, we can do quite a bit and without pulling in English. But if we need to pull in English with reflection, certainly even with like the interculturality statements and things like that, we do some of that at home. And that way we can protect our target language time in the classroom.
Stephanie, if I could just add a little bit.
Yeah.
When the CEFR came out with their statements in the reflection piece, they started doing as much as they could in the target language, but they did not do, their A1 is below the intermediate. And so they were already starting with learners who could use language to express more than ours can at the beginning. So that's why we've, in doing a lot of these things through Necessful and ACTL, have chosen to present it in English, because most of our learners in the United States are in that novice level, unfortunately. And then with the reflection, we've also done a lot of research that has pointed to the fact that when you are doing deep reflection, that best happens in your native language. So that's why we suggest that happen at home, not in the classroom. So it can be done in your native language, but that we bring it back. And there are ways given on in the reflection pieces on the Necessful website about how you can do that. You know, start it maybe with a sprinkling in the classroom, do the deep reflection at home, and then bring it back in the class in a simplified manner in the target language.
So I have a second question, and that is, you were showing us this little chart where as the students upload evidence for various can-dos, it would darken to indicate their
Yes.
progress along the learning chart. What's the role as a teacher in that? Does the teacher evaluate that before and says, yes, you have in fact evaluated yourself, you know, appropriately, or no, you're actually further along, or no, you're actually, you know, not at the point yet? I mean, how does that interplay?
That is a great question. So, and that actually boils down to a bigger question about how it is that you want to use evidence in your classroom. So Linguafolio is and has always been for the students and by the students. And so in terms of looking at their evidence, it's entirely possible that someone will upload something that you actually couldn't evaluate. So the example I used with the last group was my personal least favorite task in Spanish is bartering in the target language. I hate doing it. It makes me uncomfortable. But I did commit to getting lower than $10 on these bracelets that I was buying on the beach for my kids. And I got them for $7, and I was very proud of my $7, even though my boss did better than I did and got a lower price. And so, but for me, that's a very salient artifact. So I would upload a picture for that as a learner, absolutely. Now you as my teacher can't evaluate it. It's all up to me to evaluate it. Okay. But if you do, you can as a teacher actually see how your students have evaluated, and you can recommend that they change their evaluations, lower or higher, and send them an explanation as to why you make that recommendation. They at that point have to decide whether they accept it or not. If they reject it, it won't let them submit their rejection without submitting an explanation to accompany it that says, no, I disagree because this and this and this, maybe something you didn't see in the background or whatever kind of information is there. And that process can go on as long as it needs to. It can volley back and forth.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay. I'm particularly concerned about writing these days because so many students are using computers to help them formulate, find vocabulary, or even translate. And it becomes really tricky to evaluate what they can actually do on their own. So
that has, at least it's not a new problem, it's just a more prominent problem that we're encountering right now. What we do see is with increased autonomy tends to come increased motivation. So as students have a bigger voice in their language learning, one would hope and expect that for the most part, the evidence would be more and more original and not something that... Okay, buddy, I have to... Okay, I'll come help you in a minute. Bye. I'm sorry, I locked the door, but I didn't shut it all the way. Oh, I apologize. I lost my train of thought, but yes, there we go. With increased autonomy, we tend to see that students become more motivated and then would expect that the quality of their evidence in terms of the originality increases, and it becomes more reflective of what they can actually do.
Okay.
Thank you. What other questions do you all have for me? Oh, I see it in the chat. Let me make sure. Un abrazo a Melissa, pero se fue. Okay.
I do have another question.
Yes.
Can this be used for multi-year portfolio keeping? Okay.
It can. So the student accounts cost $2 per student per academic year. But unless your district requires us to delete their data, we don't delete their data. And so it follows them to the next time they have it, even if there's a lapse. So if they have it for a year and have a year off and then have it again, their data will follow them. And we are developing an exportable portfolio feature right now. So they would be able to at least export in a very organized fashion all of the data that they wanted to keep. And it will display in kind of like essentially a web page, but it looks like a web page, but it can display without an internet connection. And so that way you maintain the integrity of like an audio file that a PDF wouldn't have.
Does anybody here already use LinguaFolio? Not yet. Okay.
Well, feel free to experiment, and I will type my email into the chat as well. So if questions occur to you in the middle of the night, hopefully not, but if they do, send me an email. I'll write back. Let me do this to everybody.
Can students easily link YouTube videos to it? Okay.
Yes, that is one of the accepted file types.
So, okay.
Yes. And so while it doesn't have Google Doc integration in that you would open up in Google and select from there, you can also link Google Docs within the URL option when you upload evidence.
Does it take the place of grading? I mean, are there classrooms where the portfolio is the way assessment happens and there's nothing else? Or
what tends to happen is there are a variety of processes that are really specific to school and district rules about grading. Certainly in my own class, how the samples were, maybe the evidence samples was a quiz that it was a reading assessment and that was uploaded as into it, but I had already graded it separately. I didn't tend to use their portfolios to grade the evidence. I used their portfolios to grade their reflective practices, and that was connected to 21st century learning skills. So looking and evaluating them that way. So the evidence was in kind of two places, if it was graded evidence at least. And there are some teachers that use it to grade within it. It's really a formative tool though. It's intended to help students document their growth over time. And so we certainly don't want to punish students for learning and trying something hard, right? And giving them a lower grade because they didn't achieve something that was slightly out of reach. And so that's certainly something to think about and establish a pattern for your that aligns with your school and district grading policies, but they widely vary. So hopefully that gives us a couple ideas of how it could be handled.
But it certainly could lead toward performance-based grading
Yes.
for those districts or universities that have for each course or have a proficiency target. You've got all your evidence right there. You know, we've promoted in JCPS performance-based grading by setting the target, whatever the target is for the unit or module or whatever you're using, to be a B, and anything performed above that to be an A, and below, you know, by sub-level. So it's very easy to use this for grading purposes. You would just want to make sure you had that balance of all the modes of communication and the intercultural too.
Yeah. And can you, do people use like AAPPL or stamp testing or something like that? Does that flow into evidence as well? Or is that just something separate because it's outside?
There are certainly students that upload it as evidence, and then they select as many can-do statements as they can for a proficiency level that they've already demonstrated evidence for, so that it fills in their target, so that they get that, you know, satisfaction of watching the target fill in. But then they're not belaboring their time spending, you know, because they know they've moved past it and they don't have to go back and keep filling in things. Sort of, blah. I can't say words today.
So if they've done the testing, you can set them up right at the beginning with this really great sense of success by seeing it fill in. That's kind of cool.
It's a nice visual. It's certainly a nice visual.
And I'm sorry I missed the beginning of it because I couldn't get my computer fired up because it wasn't hooked up to the outlet previously. So I missed whether or not how much you talked about the reflection. And I found that really helpful when you were talking about that on Tuesday. And did you mention like the 4 times before you get into the routine? And
we did talk about that 4-time kind of tipping point. What we also talked about on Tuesday that I didn't mention today was how, or at least as explicitly, how easy it is to incorporate reflection every single day into your classroom by doing a quick exit ticket, by doing something really small. Usually it's really nice to do at the beginning and the end. So for a particular can-do statement, where did you start today? Where do you feel like you ended today? But something really small that they turn into that can also inform your teaching for the next day. Oh, everyone feels like they're doing really well here. We might be able to move on versus we should revisit some material, things along those lines. And so that's kind of, we had a 3-tier approach to reflection in my class. 1 short thing every single day. We had a bigger reflection about 1 really salient artifact for the week per week, and then the final portfolio where the students came up with something from each mode of communication to include for that whole unit's work and all of that. And so that's how I handled it in my class, and I had to cover a little less content than I would have liked. However, their scores skyrocketed, and they were an IB program, so it was a little bit different than Apple or Stamp, but I still saw an incredible increase in their scores by making that shift. So I certainly recommend it.
And I've seen teachers who had the first week of school started to, talk about the proficiency scale and get students to understanding what that means, what you can perform at different sublevels. And then later on during the year, having them peer assess and sort of practice, or giving them something that comes from an outside source and trying to have them evaluate how that demonstrates that specific sublevel. So when they make those goals and they're tied to the can-do statements, they really see the difference in what each sublevel means and can see what they need to do for moving from one to the next. And honestly, I think that reflection, the more they do that, the more it becomes true ownership of learning and that, autonomous learning for them. And I think it takes away from what you were talking about. They're using the Google Translate or whatever, however they can find things, because that gives them a real false sense. I think that makes them feel badly about what they're doing because they know it's not a true evaluation.
All right.
We had a question in the chat about flipgrid.
So this is how can you download a flipgrid video? It has been a while since I've used it. If you can download a flipgrid video, you should be able to upload it, no problem. It should take pretty much every video type that I've encountered. However, if it doesn't, you can send me a message and it might be something quick in the code we can fix, or we can talk about how to export to a different URL or things along those lines and problem solve that with you. But I haven't had any problems with, no one has ever brought up to me that flipgrid wouldn't work. And it's a pretty popular platform. So yes.
Well, if we don't have any other questions for Stephanie, we can go ahead and go into our breakout rooms. And Jackie, do you want to tell us what we should be discussing?
Well, it might be nice to think about how something like this could be useful for you as you go back into a new world in the fall. It certainly is a tool that can be used in a face-to-face classroom or in a virtual setting. So, what might we do that could allow us to make use of this? And you might want to be some talk about, well, how can I get it paid for? If you don't think that, if the payment is an issue. Or if that is beyond the realm, then talking about reflection in general, reflection about learning, about achieving certain proficiency targets or intercultural targets.
Okay. Awesome. So I'm going to, let's see, we've got about 9 people. Put like 3 people in each room. You're going to get an invite, so just accept that invite.
This will not be an escape room, right? We'll have to stay there.
Yes. Go down.
Brave New World.
Hello.
Hi,
So
Jennifer.
I was already thinking something like the first semester of Japanese 1 is such a, it's fun for students, but at the same time it's a slog because we spend so much time, having to learn the writing system, and so much time is spent on that sometimes I get the sense at the end of semester 1 they feel like, oh, we haven't done anything.
Huh.
But if I could give them like a checklist, like the lingua folio, even basic things, it's like, I can write my name, I can introduce myself, I can ask how someone's doing, I can, say the date, real basic stuff, but you can accomplish a big old long list at the end of Japanese 1 that maybe they, in the day-to-day they lose track of how much they've actually progressed.
No, that's really cool. I am looking next year at very small classes. So we've had, a drop in enrollment. And so I'm looking at these classrooms that have 4 or 5 kids in them. And it's, I'm going to have to differentiate hugely in that classroom because they're all going at different paces and they have different interests. And so I really believe that having a portfolio program like that in place is going to allow them to pursue their interests while, checking off can-do statements.
Yeah.
And keep them interested in it,
Mm-hmm.
particularly if we're going to, have online instruction. I think that could be a huge motivator. At least I'm hoping, keeping my fingers crossed that that's going to be the case.
Yeah, I mean, I do something similar. I don't use lingua folio, but like, how Jackie was saying, like the beginning of the year, my 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders, we talk about the proficiency levels. This is we set goals. I don't do such a good job about strategies. We talk a little bit about like, maybe one class being like, oh, hey, what are some things you're going to do to meet your goal? But then as the year goes along, and I don't do evidence in the same way because I don't see them often enough. Like I only see them twice a week for 25 minutes, so like less than an hour a week. But like as we finish a unit, they glue their stuff in their interactive notebook. So instead of using the interactive notebook as like a textbook, it's almost, their portfolio. They've got their writing in there. They've got, I've even put like QR codes in that, go to videos of them, speaking. The only thing we don't really capture is interpersonal.
I thought she was to use an example to, I wanted to see a specific example.
Oh.
Information, I need to
Well, it's free. It's free for the teachers, I think, always, and then the student accounts are $2. But actually, they're free until July 1st, so you could get in and play around with it maybe over the summer, and then make a decision.
For example, I was thinking maybe for reading, extra reading, we can upload a text and simple reading. They can and ask question about that and discuss, or maybe a discussing question. Could be a great, like a support of the class or something like that. I don't know because I never use it.
Yeah, I think the idea is rather than you giving the students, you give the student assignments, but then for the lingua folio, they get to pick which assignments or activities that they've done that they want to highlight and put in their portfolio. So like maybe you do that reading like on a different site, but sorry, it's almost dinner time over here, so this but you know, but maybe 2 or 3 of your students were like, oh, I feel really good about that assignment, you know, I'm going to put it in my portfolio. Go play now.
Okay. Well, we have to try to see.
Yeah, and it depends on the age group. So like, and your time limit. So like for me, they don't get to choose. Like we don't do a lot of different things. Like there's like, they can choose, like I'll give them like an idea of like, here's what a novice low, a novice mid, or novice high would look on this assignment. But everyone's doing this assignment because there's 550 of them, and I don't have time to make individual. I don't have classes of 4.
Yeah, well,
You know, we're like complete opposite situation.
I wish I had classes of 20 or 25, all right? So this is not an ideal situation at all, but it's a situation that I'm dealing with, so.
Well, and then like, you know, this isn't something I would probably use with kindergarten. You know, they're not very reflective. It's just like, can you do it? Can you not do it? Like when she puts up that students undervalue their abilities, I'm like, that's not true for little kids. They speak 3 words of Spanish and they're like, what language do you speak? They're like, well, English. Well, and Spanish. Obviously, I speak Spanish.
I imagine that the websites that she gave us for the Alpha Network and Nestle will have perhaps some tutorials or some video
yes, I think so,
examples.
Okay.
So I'll definitely be looking at that. Technology-wise, we use a lot of Linked. I don't know if you guys use Linked at all, if you know about that online platform that allows you to upload pictures and videos and ask students questions either via text, or you record something and the students speak back or they type back, which is, you know, the way that we do a lot of interpersonal practice. And it'd be sort of cool to know whether they can use something from that website as evidence in the portfolio, but that's a technology question rather than anything else.
Well, I know that like Brenna Bird at UK, she presented 2 weeks ago, and she was talking about, and she teaches college, so older students, but she had like formed speaking groups, so groups of 3, and the students, they're adults. The students had to call each other like once a week and have like a short conversation, and then she actually had them like write a follow-up thing, so it went from interpersonal to presentational. But you could, I mean, these days, like you could get on a Zoom call with your speaking group, record it, download that video, boom, upload it. Now that's your interpersonal.
Interpersonal, yeah.
Yeah. So we got about 1 more minute. I sent out a 2-minute warning, but I don't think it comes to this room because I'm
Oh, I saw it.
Oh, you did? Oh, good, good.
I saw it.
I don't know what people see and don't see, but.
So how difficult is the administration of your portfolio? I mean, how much time does it take to maintain it, to go through it, to, you know, to sort of see how the students are managing it?
Me?
Yeah, because you're using a portfolio, not LinguaFolio, but you're having the students establish a portfolio.
Yeah, it's an interactive notebook. It's just so most of the time, it's like whatever they're doing, I usually have them do it separately. I look at it first, see who's doing well, who's at what level, and then I hand it back to them and then they glue it in. Or if they're doing it already in the notebook, then I'm just walking around the room, kind of check marking people where they're at.
So this is a real notebook. This is nothing. Yeah,
it's a composition notebook, and they keep it from year to year. So I've been doing from 3rd grade this year. I did 2nd grade because I realized we were doing a lot of writing in 2nd grade, so why not? And then I keep it. So then like at the beginning of next year, I'll have to go through and organize everybody's notebooks back into the right classroom. So it's a pain in the butt in the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
But it's worth it when I hand them back at the first time that in the beginning of the year, and the kids are like, I mean, they go through it and they're like, oh, memories. Oh, I remember doing this. Look, remember that? Oh, this was fun. Like,
The scrapbook.
yeah, it's scrapping those
what it
standards.
is,
And I always tell, and then at the end of 5th grade, I was actually just thinking about this. I was like, oh shoot, how are we going to, I don't know. Normally at the end of 5th grade, they get to take it home, and I tell them, save it, use it in middle school. Like, you've got good information in here. Your teachers are going to be like, how do you know all this stuff? You'll be like, oh, it's my notebook. And yeah, but I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to get it to them this year because it's a hobby.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Well, the reason why I'm now really desperately interested in a portfolio is because my AP students, you know, I talk to them and say, we did this kind of thing in 8th grade, and then we did this kind of thing in French too, and then French, and then no memory, none whatsoever about it. I'm thinking a portfolio would be a really good thing for them. Just
Well, even if you did like if you could, like, if your admin does want to spring, I think Linguafolio is like the top, if you can do that. But if you have to go like real low tech like me, then I mean, like I said,
it works.
just the composition notebook, they glue it in, and you don't do everything in there. It's just like the highlights. I wait till the end of the unit, and it's stuff like, you know, like summative sort of things that we're putting in there.
Right.
So we don't even get halfway through the notebook in 3 years just because of the time amount.
We have to go.
Right.
Yes, we should be forcing us back to the room, or
Yeah.
to the room.
Right.
Clothes, and she cut my hair. So
Great.
that was a little bit of an inside scoop situation. I was very excited.
Yeah. I did get my appointment set, but they set it for the day that they also set my rescheduled eye surgery appointment.
Oh no.
So eyes number 1. Hair was up there, but it's down below the eye.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, we have just about 3 more minutes left. Does anyone have anything from their small group discussion that they wanted to share with the whole group?
I'm okay.
I just think it could potentially be like a really good motivational tool for the students who are perhaps aware that they're not at the same level as some of their peers in the classroom, but they can see that they're making progress. And, you know, they can check off things that they can do now. So that's, you know, always helpful. Motivation.
Yeah.
I think it's a good way to integrate the can-do statements with, you know, the self-reflection and making progress and all that. I've worked with can-do statements, but I've always been very, very dissatisfied with the way that I've been doing it, because there was this missing piece where they can see, okay, I can do this. This actually translates into making progress. So I've just not linked those two up. So I think keeping a portfolio will perhaps help me do that better. So, Jackie, do you have some good tutorials or videos to recommend, or are they available on the Nestle site? Or
I think Linguafolio actually on their site, on the Castle site, has some great YouTube videos. I guess they're just out there in YouTube land. I don't know if they're specific to the Castle site, but you can get to them through the Castle site.
Right. Okay.
I just love the idea that this could travel with a student as they progress through a program and switch teachers over time, and that it could be exported in some form for them to share in some kind of professional portfolio. So there's a huge amount of potential there. I really imagine this business of using it a minimum of 4 times in a semester. I think that's what she said. It's probably very important. You weave it into the culture of what you're doing. It doesn't just like show up on test day or something, or major due date associated with stress. It's just part of what we're doing all the time. I think that can be very positive for habit forming.
So if I were to start out with students on this, and say my French 2 students, some of them are at the novice high level. Some of them, I have 2 students who are at intermediate mid at that level. They are just really fantastic. Do they have to start from ground zero to fill in? No?
No, start where they think they are.
Okay.
You could do a self-assessment first, and then, you know, have
Yeah.
them start where they've placed themselves.
Yeah.
You know, I find
they have that inner ring that was colored in.
yeah, that'd be
We'll take a
nice.
pencil and color it in.
Yeah.
I find it amazing that you know, it's been around now for 20 years. The concept, I think, was way ahead of its time. But now with the technology so important and the online version being updated again, you know, I think it's going to be so much more usable than that portable paper portfolio that we started with. But I mean, I think we ought to be proud in Kentucky because we started the very first elementary one. But it's, you know, and it took off for a while, but because it was paper, you know, now that it's uploadable, it just makes it so much easier.
Yeah, that was a lot of paper for 500 kids.
Yeah.
Copy. But, well, if it is 5:01, I did just want to remind everyone that our KWA Fall Conference is moving online. So it will be September 19th online, and we are accepting conference session proposals until June the 1st. You'll get a short training if you need it on the platform that we're going to be using. I think it's Zoom. And you'll also have the option to have a chat moderator, so someone to kind of keep track of time in the chat for you while you're presenting as an option. So, you know, don't be scared. Please submit a proposal. And we're also accepting nominations for Teacher of the Year award until June 1st as well. So if you know of an outstanding world language educator or an admin who supports world languages or a organization or person in the community, please nominate them.
Because that person could be a new Elena.
That's right. Elena is gonna, well, I don't know if we're gonna be in San Antonio or not.
So I've only been to ACTFL once, but it was the year it was in San Antonio. but I wanna go back because I have a cousin in San Antonio that I see like every couple years.
Oh.
Like the last time I saw her was at her wedding.
Uh-huh.
So I would love to be able to go back to San Antonio and see her again. Well, also, you know, to represent Kentucky.
Oh, yeah. Well, fingers crossed. I hope that works out.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Rooting for you.
Thank you.
So, okay. Well, thank you all for coming. Next week will be our last round of virtual meetups since most people, I think everyone is done in Kentucky by next week. We're going to do just shorter ones, 30-minute, almost sort of like celebration, kind of wrap up the year. So Tuesday at 11, bring your coffee. Thursday at 4, you know, Thursday, that's the day after school's over, so you can drink whatever you want.
Thanks for moderating. Thanks for doing
No
that.
problem.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you for coming.
Have a good weekend, everybody.
Yes.
Yep.
and
Thank
good-
you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.